Hey guys, welcome to VibeWire for July 7th, 2025. One of my goals for this podcast has always been to automate as much as possible. And today I thought it might be interesting to go down that route a little bit as far as news. Generally the way I find news is what's trending on Twitter, what are people talking about, and I feel like I've curated my feed to the point where I've got a pretty good idea. I'm following some of the top newsmakers in the AI space. So if something interesting happens, I'm on X 24/7, so I'm probably going to see it happen in real time. But I also think it'd be interesting I think ultimately that might not even be necessary, be ideal for an LLM, since we have these tools now to do that research for me and to maybe surface some stories that aren't necessarily trending on X and might be something that'd be really interesting that I would have missed otherwise. So I think the top three platforms right now for deep research are Perplexity, Claude, and ChatGPT. Let me include Gemini in here. There we go. I mean, it really wouldn't be fair to leave Gemini out since I think they actually kind of spearheaded deep research, and that was the first place I ever used it. So what I want to do, I thought it would be interesting, is to just do a pretty generic query. Please find the top AI news stories of the day and run it across all platforms. And I'm going to do deep research on each and see what it comes up with. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm going to use the higher end models for each platform so we get a consistent result. And so I'll let that run for a while and I'll check back in with you in a minute. All right, so our research finished, and one of the first things I noticed right away was how much faster Perplexity finished than all the other LLMs I tried. It did search through 95 sources, it looks like, and I did notice in going through the others that, kind of similar sources, it does look like, Perplexity, it makes sense that they would be faster because this is kind of their bread and butter, and so it looks like they're doing some things on the back end to kind of keep these sources fresh, whereas, this is not the main focus of the other more general models. So, but looking through the results here, it is kind of a slow news day, which is why I decided, let's use an LLM to go do this search for me. Probably the biggest thing, this is actually right at the top here, is actually from today about the Grok launch in a European data center. One thing I noticed is that Crescendo seems to be doing some pretty good generative SEO because, you look at this headline right here, it almost matches what I searched for. Latest AI breakthroughs and news on this particular day, May, June, July 2025. And so you can see if I scroll down a little bit, here's July 7th. So they are doing a good job of aggregating these sorts of stories. This is, I would guess that, and that's why I'm seeing it across multiple platforms here. So good on them for, I have to look into this platform because they're definitely doing something right to show up and search like this. A lot of other things here weren't necessarily from today. There's another Crescendo story, Isomorphic Labs. Let's see. And then we get down to GPT-5 set for summer release. That's definitely hasn't officially been announced anywhere. Definitely not this week or today. AI workspace accounts from Search Engine Roundtable. This new Meta Superintelligence Lab was from, at least a week ago. But overall, I like the structure of this. They kind of break it down into, with the heading, they've got kind of breakthroughs in research applications, platforms and model updates. So I do kind of like the structure, major corporate developments. I like the structure that they're presenting it to me in, then I can kind of easily look at the sources. So yeah, I like this result. I like how fast it was. I would definitely use this again. Moving on to the Claude research here. Let's see if I can make this any larger. So similar things. You can see Crescendo AI is once again showing up on the results here. They also kind of break this down. The funny thing is that I've noticed this in a couple. July 7th marks a pivotal moment in artificial intelligence. That was also something that, if we jump ahead here to Gemini, the events of July 7th mark a critical inflection point. So they really want to answer this as today being something special, but it's actually kind of a slow news day, which is funny. And the Claude results, this is nice. I also like the fact that you can download it as Markdown. I haven't noticed that in the others. You can save PDF and everything and then translate it to Markdown. But one downside of downloading it as Markdown, I noticed, is that you lose all the links associated with it. So it's really better to convert it to a PDF and then extract it from there if you want to maintain the links for something. And which is ultimately really the most important thing here, I would think. Yeah, if you're going for, I don't know that I can necessarily trust the summary so far, so I like to read the actual articles still. But this does break things down nicely, similar to Perplexity, where that's kind of combines each section into, here's the latest models section with all the links associated with that. Anthropic breaks funding records. So slightly different headlines than we got from Perplexity, but they do kind of the same thing. I like that outline. Going over to ChatGPT. And ChatGPT, one thing, if you use the O3 model, it's always going to ask some follow-up questions, so you always got to answer those before it'll move on. And so it asked me kind of specifically what I was interested in, and so I told it mostly research breakthroughs and industry developments. I wasn't really interested in policy regulation or AI safety ethics side of things. And so, most of these stories, though, that it did give me, I believe, are a little bit old. So this is from June 25th. Top story here, whereas Perplexity gave me like the top story of the day right up at the top. AI models mimicking human decision making. This is interesting because it's actually from a Scientific Daily website, but this is from yesterday. Not bad. And then it also breaks things down nicely between like research breakthroughs, industry developments, and that's just those top two right there with all the links in line here. And then moving on to Gemini. This was probably my least favorite, even though they did kind of come up with the deep research model. When they originally came up with this, it really was more of a, let's write a whole paper for you. And so there are some really useful things that you can do here. One of the things I really like that they surface for you is the ability to turn this into a web page or an infographic or a quiz or an audio overview, which I imagine would pull this over into something like Notebook LM, or even describe your own app. So that's a really cool feature. I haven't played around with that much, but I do like the option to do that. Let's see. And then as far as the results, you kind of have to scroll down a little bit or open this. They don't really put I would love to see results like inline here, like we saw with all the other models. But instead of like giving you exactly, here's a sentence and here's where that sentence came from, it's more on the paragraph level. And then it's just really long-winded, honestly. Like this, there's a lot of, it breaks this down into, this has nothing to do with the events of today, the San Francisco consensus, Schmidt's warning. Like this is also very woke AI things throughout here. Lots of concern with ethics, and which is not at all what I asked for at all. A very deep, it is a very deep analysis looking into like the geopolitical framework and supply chain. And so you can see, it's more talking about just like the overall overarching market state that we're in right here with different stakeholders and long-term risks. Once again, a nice little integration because Google has all these properties. They've done a good job of connecting them together, so I could export this in the Sheets. I like that option. But just way too long-winded and not at all really what I was looking for or what I asked for here, though it could be useful depending on what you're looking for. And then, they even get into this widespread systemic vulnerability and blackmail rates, and it has been in the news a little bit recently. So it is kind of, I don't know where these are actually coming from. I'm not sure if I'm going to trust the Indian Express decision on what the reported blackmail rate was. It'd be nice if that actually came from a particular paper. I know Anthropic released some research around this recently. I'm not sure why that's got to come from IndianExpress.com. I'm not sure these numbers even mean anything. So yeah, overall, I think Perplexity would be the one I would jump to from here on. There's one other thing I wanted to show here. It was interesting. I noticed while I was kind of browsing around on Product Hunt, the top product of the day right now is this StepFun Diligence. It's the number one launching, the number one ranked product right now, and it basically claims to be able to do deep research and to give you diligence checks on resources, and it looks just like they've basically copied the Perplexity UI here. And so I gave it the same prompt, pulled in all these Chinese news sources almost exclusively, it looks like, and it really only looked at 8 web pages. And then, as far as their what they decided the top news stories of the day are all Chinese, entirely 100% Chinese related news stories. So not at all what I'm interested in or what I was looking for. This doesn't look like it was any better than any of the other sources. Definitely they looked at fewer sources to determine this. So kind of curious that this made it to the top of Product Hunt. Obviously no manipulation going on there at all.